Hiya.
It's been 4 years today since we left the EU. Big question, I know, but how do you think it's going so far?
Well, it depends what you want out of Brexit. I mean, it's 4 years since we left the political institutions, so since we stopped having members of the European Parliament, the UK's own commissioner and a judge on the European Court of Justice. It's slightly less long, just over 3 years since we started our new trading relationships. Remember, we went into that transition period when nothing really for people changed. So it depends very much what you wanted out of Brexit. If you thought that you were voting for Brexit just so that laws would be made in the UK rather than in Brussels and that we wouldn't be tied up in sort of Brussels schemes and things like that, then that's pretty much been achieved, except you will have realised that maybe the UK on its own has a bit less room for manoeuvre, a bit less clout than it had sometimes, because we have to still look over the shoulder at what the European market, European rules are, because our businesses still need to export there. We've had to add quite a lot of bureaucrats to manage things that previously were done at European level. But if that's what you wanted, then unless you're in Northern Ireland, and we've been hearing lots about that over the last couple of days, then you can sort of tick the box. If you voted for Brexit to reduce immigration, then you may not be happy with the latest immigration figures. Show that inward migration is much higher than it was before Brexit. But at least you can blame the government for that, because that's a consequence of choices that the government you voted for or didn't vote for, will vote for, won't vote for at the next election, made about the new UK migration regime. And I think quite a lot of people were surprised that the UK went for such a liberalised migration regime. But that's a political choice made here now. If you're, if you voted for Brexit to have more money to spend on public services and thought that it was going to lead to a hugely better NHS, you might be asking, have we seen that? In fact, a lot more money has gone into the NHS, more, I think, than was promised on the side of the bus. But we've seen generally weak economic performance. In the case of the UK, that seems to be partly because of Brexit, but there have been huge numbers of other things going on with the pandemic, with Ukraine, and a lot of things get blamed on Brexit that certainly aren't just Brexit. So if you listen to your lady talking about cost of living, Brexit might have, put up prices a little bit, because it's harder for people to bring things into the UK. The UK economy has a bit less competition going on, makes it easier to put up prices. Some places are definitely suffering from labour shortages, but there are other really big factors, and the UK is certainly not the only country experiencing a cost of living crisis. People in the US are talking about it. People in continental Europe are, and none of them had Brexit.
Yes, I mean, just as we were saying, it's so many different angles to look at, so many different things that have impacted it all at once. Your point there about I wanted to just touch on about relations with Europe, and how do you think Brexit has, I suppose, impacted the way the world looks at the United Kingdom, how we look on the world stage, and of course our relationship with Europe?
Well, I think quite a lot of other countries, if you look at sort of Biden's America and things like that, looked and said, what on earth have these Brits done? Why do they want to leave the EU? Though, quite a few countries, I think, were extraordinarily surprised that we went for Brexit, but others are quite keen to talk sort of partnerships or whatever. We had we had trade negotiation with Japan. We're running some difficulties now with Canada, because we have to do that on our own. So I think I think people are probably adjusting to that. But one of the big problems for the UK since Brexit is that there is a lot of big conversations about what's going on in the world, and particularly the world economy, that we're not really part of. So we've seen an increasing sort of move, particularly in the wake of Ukraine and the pandemic, towards the world economy, if you like, sort of, ending globalization and moving backwards into big regional blocks. And there are lots of conversations between the EU and the US, which the UK is not part of. We sort of have to wait outside and find out what they agree. But there's some other areas where we have continued to play quite a big role. The Prime Minister was quite successful in convening his AI summit. last November. The UK hosted COP26, but I think it's going to be a bit more effort for us to, make clear we're big actors. We've been a big actor on Ukraine and things like that, and I think that certainly has done quite a lot for the UK's reputation in the West. We're still on the UN Security Council. We're still a big player in NATO.